Christina, just a heads up, you're dating yourself with your t-shirt.
That's okay.
We may need to have a t-shirt day at meeting at some point. So, Andrew, Aaron, are we close enough?
We are ready to go.
Good. Very well. So noting the time is 5:31, I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to fellow commissioners, of course, members of the public, staff, council, who are joining us to the regular meeting of the County of San Diego's Independent Redistricting Commission. As we begin, I want to note that we'll be changing our procedures just a bit today based on suggestions from commissioners and others. I also want to thank commissioners in advance for their patience and feedback on these changes, and thank the commissioners and staff who attended this morning's statewide training that was hosted by Common Cause on redistricting. A recording of that session should be on Common Cause's website in the coming days, and I'll ask staff to keep everyone abreast of that. And we as a commission may want to discuss that once all commissioners have had a chance to view it. It's 3 hours though. I think it was seen to be fairly useful, and I'd encourage everyone, if they do, to at least watch the parts of it that you're most interested in, all of it if you can. With that, let me now turn to our clerk, Andrew Potter, for some more key information about today's meeting. Andrew.
Great, thank you, Chairman Boehm. Any members of the public who wish to provide oral testimony during today's meeting, please review the instructions posted on the redistricting webpage at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. Individuals that wish to speak must submit an online request to speak form. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the roll call. Andrew, could you please call the roll?
I'd be happy to. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all commissioners are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be handled by a roll call vote. I'll ask the commissioners to unmute themselves and say here or present, and I will call you alphabetically by last name. So we'll start with Chair Boehm.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Katerina.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Dostal.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Here.
Commissioner Larson. Commissioner Larson.
You did.
I see you, Mr. Larson, but it looks like you're muted. There we go.
For some reason, the little button that makes me mute or not didn't seem to work. Now it's working.
Great. All right. Commissioner
Okay.
Franz.
Here.
Commissioner Russ.
Here.
And Commissioner Serban.
Present.
Great. Thank you.
Very good. The next item on the agenda is non-agenda public communication speakers. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on subject matters within the commission's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action the commission may take is a referral to staff. Andrew, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda items?
Thank you. We have 2 requests to speak this evening. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to address the commission. We will be calling speakers by the name of those individuals that are logged into the Zoom session. For the callers, for the individuals that we've been calling on, I'll ask you to please state your name for the record. And we will begin with Kiana Asamanfar.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kiana Asamanfar. I'm with California Common Cause. First, let me say thank you for your service in serving as a commissioner in San Diego County and for dedicating your year to carrying out a fair redistricting process in the county. I wanted to firstly comment on the public comment mechanism in San Diego County. In signing up to speak, I had to fill out a form ahead of time, which indicated that I had to sign up before the beginning of this meeting. I would just like to recommend that the commission explore ways of allowing live public comment that don't require sign up ahead of time. I think this would help ensure accessibility and maximum participation in the redistricting process, and the form kind of indicates that you need to plan ahead of time and can't address the commission if you miss that deadline. Secondly, I know a number of the commissioners joined today's workshop hosted by Common Cause. We're very excited to have you all join. On the topic of trainings, I wanted to urge the commission to explore the trainings that the commission is required to undergo and really build out a calendar for that. I know the commission right now is making really important decisions on outreach, schedules, a number of issues that will really impact the commission's work and the final product. And I would urge the commission to really begin robust training on redistricting principles and practices and requirements going into those big decisions. Lastly, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of the independence of this commission and really just making sure that commissioners are in the driver's seat of this process. Regarding the selection of the RFP, we would support the commissioners being the ones developing the criteria, interviewing candidates in a public setting, and being the final decision makers on that critical consultant role. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janine Arakat.
Good evening to the Commission. This is Janine Arakat from PANA, the Partnership for Advancement of New Americans. First, I wanted to thank you all for being so flexible with your schedules and Commission meeting times to maximize public engagement, even though it's 5:30 p.m. after a long day of work, I'm sure. So just wanted to say that we really appreciate you all doing this and taking that into consideration. I'm calling primarily to ask the Commission to provide an update on when you are planning to receive training, since as a Commission, you'll need to make hiring decisions and other planning that requires having a better understanding of how redistricting works and what best practices are. If you could give us an answer at that sometime during the meeting or put it on the next meeting's agenda, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And then in the Zoom session, I also see David Holtzman has his hand raised. Were you interested in speaking under non-agenda public comment?
Oh, I've unmuted myself now. You can hear me. Hi. I just want to say I'm a member of the County of Los Angeles Redistricting Commission. And I just noticed in tuning into your meeting that I can't see all the commissioners on the screen. Gallery mode is not enabled for me. I think you need to have that to be a proper virtual meeting, because you have to be able to see if all the commissioners are paying attention. So I just thought I would mention that.
Great, thank you. And that concludes non-agenda public communication this evening.
Very good. Thank you all for the comments. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the January 14th, 2021 regular meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay, I'll take Commissioner Garcia having offered the motion. Is there a second?
Second that.
Commissioner Russ seconds the motion. Any discussion?
Yeah, one thing that would be helpful is if staff could, when they're listening to the individuals who are speaking, if they could tell their organization. I try to write it down in my notes, but I'm not very good sometimes at this, and it would be very helpful. I do see many of the same folks, and some of them I know where they, what organization they're with. But I'm wondering if that would be possible, if you could just say what organization, or even if they're not representing anybody but themselves, that'd be fine.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Very good. Seeing none, Andrew, I'll ask you to go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you. Before I call the roll, I'd like to note that we will be calling names in random order for all the votes of the commission from this point forward using a randomizer tool. So listen up for your name. We'll start with Commissioner Chen.
Here.
You're going to aye or no or abstain for minutes approval.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye.
Great. Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal,
Aye.
Commissioner Servin,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye, and thank you.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Chair Bame.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to item 5 on the agenda, redistricting budget status update and approval. First, we'll hear a brief training presentation from county auditor and controller staff, then review the budget update. We'll then have an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions, then hear from any public speakers, then hold a discussion on any motion. I'll turn now to Barbara Jimenez for introductions. Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today, as the Chair mentioned, we're here to present an update on the budget for the IRC. We will have 2 presenters on this item, a training on the county financial management and a second one on the detailed budget. The staff report on this item addresses questions from the commissioners at the last budget discussion, which was at the December 18th meeting. Notably, there were questions around transparency and accountability over the use of public funds. So as you know, county staff is currently administering the redistricting budget on the commission's behalf. These are county funds and are subject to the county's extensive internal controls over spending, and has established policies and procedures to ensure the appropriate management of public funds in compliance with all our standards, regulations, and laws. For example, the Elections Code has specific requirements for translation. The agenda for your commission meetings have been translated into 8 required languages and posted on our redistricting website. Before we talk about the spending, we want to have a brief opportunity for commissioner training. And as noted previously by the commission, ensuring appropriate expenditure of funds is critical. So to provide insight into the county's financial management, we've invited Gabriela, or Gabby Pena, from the county's auditor and controllers department to provide a brief presentation on our internal controls over the various business areas that span across the county funds. Gabby is an ERP system administrator that oversees the county's financial reporting applications that generate the county's comprehensive annual financial report, and the administrator of the county's internal controls process known as FRAC, or Financial Risk Assessment and Controls. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Very great. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barbara. It's a pleasure to be here today with you guys to discuss this process with you. It's always exciting to know that someone cares. Someone cares. My hope is that after my brief presentation today, you can be assured that we do have excellent controls over our contracting and spending, and that this FRAC process that we have, it's an annual process in the county, is the basis of us assuring you that we are continually monitoring our controls and making sure that they are working as they are designed to be working. Okay, so with that, let's start our presentation. In case you're wondering what the pictures are, they're all New Zealand. I wish to go there one day, so there they are. Next slide, please, Ms. Maritza. I will be covering these 6 points today. Question number 1, which is the most popular, is what does FRAC stand for? So we'll cover that as well. Next slide. FRAC stands for Financial Risk Assessment and Controls. Next slide. What happened here is in 2008, the standards were issued by the Auditing Standards Association. They went ahead and issued some standards that required us to produce some kind of a mechanism to control, to have internal controls in place. These standards had these 5 goals that you see here in front of you as their main purpose. They were affecting us as non-public and governmental entities. There were major changes in the way that audits were going to be performed. They had to do with how they're going to gather evidence and how they were going to ensure that those audits were effective and efficient. Okay, next slide. So as a response to those new requirements, and we had to be in compliance, and it's something that had to be done and be part of our audit, we started looking for a process. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So what we are using as our framework is this model that you have here. Now, everybody was supposed to receive a handout, which is a big picture of this picture that I have here on the screen. So I hope you guys have that in front of you. COSO, let me get my notes here. COSO stands for the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission. They are a private sector initiative that jointly sponsor and are funded by the American Accounting Association, also known as the AAA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, known as the AICPA, the Financial Executives International, which is known as the FEI, and the Institute of Management Accountants, which are known as the IMA, and the Institute of Internal Auditors, which are known as the IIA. You know, we like our acronyms, so there they are. This group is dedicated to providing leadership through the development of frameworks and guidance on internal controls, enterprise risk management, and fraud deterrence. Okay, their internal control framework is widely accepted and it's used around the world. It is recognized as a leading framework for designing, implementing, conducting, and assessing the effectiveness of internal controls. So we thought this is a great framework for us. So this is the basis of what we based our FRAC project on. This cube is a 3D cube. If you notice on the right-hand side, you have the organization at its different levels. On the top, you have something that's called the control objectives. And on the top, it says operations, reporting, and compliance. And I'll cover that a little bit right now. In the very front, you have 5 items, and those are what they call the 5 components of an internal control. And that has to do with control, environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring activities. All of those components must be in all internal control processes in order for them to be considered effective and efficient. And underneath each of those components, the COSO organization set up 17 guiding principles, which are like fundamental concepts under each of those controlling items. And those are listed on this little map for you, this little diagram. Hopefully you'll be able to log on to their website and learn more about that. That is the basis of our process. So let's go to the next slide, please. I know that unless you work in the area of finance, some of the terminology and some of these words don't mean much. So I like using simple little examples that will put everything together and show you how it's actually working in real life. And I'm using an owner that wants to have a pet. Okay, I'm a proud owner of a German Shepherd myself, so I actually went through this process. You want to have a pet. The law says that all pet owners must have a license. Your dog must have a license. So that is compliance. That's the very first objective of this cube, of this internal control. There is a law out there and people should know about it. Otherwise, me as a pet owner don't know I need to have a license, right? So the compliance part of this process says there's a law. Are you communicating that law to the right people? Do the right people know about this? The second part, the second component here, the second objective is operations. Now that I know that there's a law that says I must have a license for my dog, I need to know, where do I go? What do I do? Who do I give my money to? How much is it going to cost? So operations must have the ability to provide all that information to the customer in order for them to conduct their service and get the license for the dog. And also, once that is done, the customer must have a license, and then all those transactions must be recorded into a financial system. We use the Oracle e-business suite as our financial system. After that is done, me as an ERP system administrator, at the end of the year, I capture all these transactions and I interface them into another application that actually produces our annual financial report. And you can see the pictures there of our report for this year, which is also accessible at the county website under Auditor and Controller. It's available there for you. It's a 200 and some page document. And then there's a little one there with the little honeycombs. Those are for the non-accountants, the ones that they can't handle the a lot of reading on the big one. This little one has a lot of pictures and it's a quick summary of the CAFR for you. But what happens is after those transactions are in the system, I actually bring them into my reporting. FRAC starts in February. So in a couple of weeks, all my FRAC business owners will be receiving an email and they're going to start doing their work on FRAC. Their internal controls are going to be updated and being monitored. And I'll show you right now what that means for them. After they're done updating their documents, I will provide all those documents to our internal auditors. Our internal auditors are on a rotating audit schedule. They will go through these business areas and they will audit those business areas. There's two types of audits. There's an official audit and there's something that's called existence testing. And this is where an auditor can pick whatever they want from those documents and double check, I want to audit this one. And then they go to the business owner and say, prove it to me, show it to me. And it's on the fly. There's no warning. You just know that you're subject to being audited. So your documents must be always updated in order to meet that audit. After the internal audit has completed their audit, we implement their changes, their recommendations, and then we hand everything over to our external auditors. MGO is our external auditing firm right now. They will receive all those documents and they will perform their own audits against it. If we do a good job, we get 5 good stars and we're very happy from that. Okay, that's from beginning to end, the process that we go through. Any questions up to now on this? Okay.
Yeah, Gabby,
Yes.
I do have a question. Now you're auditing, this isn't an end of the year auditing. This is during the year. You're doing this randomly and nobody knows when you're gonna do it, but it's during the year. It's not an end of the year audit.
No, it is it's an annual audit. It is at the end of the year and as part of the financial statements. Yes.
Okay.
It's only at the end of the year.
But do you do anything during the year? Do you go in and look and see, kind of how goes it? How's it, are you over budget, under budget? Do you do any of that during the year?
Not from the FRAC process. It can, I'm not aware of anything that maybe our internal auditors may be doing, because they're in charge of audits across the operations. This is exclusively an annual process that deals with the internal controls.
Yeah, you said that it began in February, and that's why I was
yes, they have until April to finish updating their documentation, and then I hand that over to the internal auditors, and they go in through around June, July, beginning of July. That's when they finish their audits, and then they provide me the information, and then we implement all the updates that we have. And you'll see it's pretty intense. I have a little summary data for you that you'll see how deep it is. It's not something that you could do every day.
Yeah, and the county's fiscal year is when?
It starts in July and it ends on June 30.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so at a minimum, in order for you to be able to, as a manager and you're responsible for providing accounting and stewardship for the resources that have been given to you, at a minimum, you're required to have reporting. Okay, so that's very important to us. That's why that's circled. We concentrate on that piece. Let's go to the next slide, please. When we started back in 2008, we only had 17 business areas. Today, we have 28 business areas. And what we did is we went through our financial statements and identified all areas that had any level of risk. And this is what we came up with. For your project, my understanding, if you do have a budget, you will be covered under the budget business process. You will be covered under the accounts payable. Oh, I'm in a room where I have to move. Okay, there we go. I'm in a county conference room. Okay, so you also get affected by the accounts payable business process. Okay, and that's because you're going to be making payments to your vendors, to your consultants. When you do that RFP, I believe you're on the way to do that. Purchasing, which is number 22 on this list, you are also covered under that process. So as you go through your RFP process, you're going to be subject to all the internal controls within that area as well. Those are the only ones that I can think of right now that you have that based on the information I have. So you're covered right there. Also a little bit of general ledger, because all your transactions will be posted to the general ledger. So you're subject to the general ledger internal controls as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, under FRAC, we do it in 3 parts. One, we have some what we call assessment tools, some documents that we need to have filled out for us. That's our risk assessment process. After that, those documents are filled out, we move on to our what we call the second phase, our audit review. We have our auditors go in there and take a look at the information, confirm and audit the data that's there. And as a result of that, we are provided with issue logs, recommendations, and status reports. And all that information is taken into consideration, and that moves on to the third phase, which is the risk control. At that point, we implement and evaluate all the findings from the auditors and resolve any issues that are out there. Okay, next slide. These are the 3 assessment tools that we require from those 28 business areas that you saw on the previous slide. We require them to submit to us what we call a control matrix. This is an Excel file that will list every single risk that they see possible in that business area. We have what's called what can go wrong. We sit down and say, tell me what can go wrong with your process. And tell me, as a result of what can go wrong, what will happen if it does go wrong? And then we ask them, what control do you have in place to either prevent or to detect or mitigate that risk that you just identified? And then we do some coding across those controls for the auditors because they need that for their audit work. And then we gather information such as contact persons, procedure documents, all of that stuff is gathered and updated every single year. So when a person says, I have this procedure, we are requiring your procedures to be up to date and that what you say on this matrix is exactly what's being done, because those auditors are going to come in to test and confirm that they are doing that exactly. In addition, we ask them to do something that's called a PAD, which is a process analysis document. This is where we say, if you had to put in words your process and you had to articulate it in words, how would you say it? Tell us what is the background behind this process. Tell us what goes into the process, what comes out of it, and any other special notes that you have. And that's a Word document. And then in addition, we take another step. We say, we want to know, we want you to flow your process out from beginning to end, and we want your swim lanes to be individual departments or entities. That way we have a clear line of responsibility and we know exactly where all your key controls are within that process. By us looking and reviewing at their process flows, we can identify gaps. We can also identify where you have repetitive action, repetitive behavior in your process. All that stuff gets captured and auditors key in on that stuff, and we do too. Okay, next slide, please. This is an example of how deep we go into the controls. We actually ask, and that's what WCGW means, what could go wrong. That's another acronym for us. Okay, so we go in there and say, tell us what can go wrong. And then we look at the control. We want to know who does it, what is being done, where are you doing it, how are you doing it, why are you doing it, and when are you doing it? We want to know the details. And that's what the auditors test. You said that this person does it. And they'll test, is it true that this person does it? How do they do it? They want to see how you did it, and they want evidence of that. And then the procedure, if there's a procedure in place, which is one of a very good control for us, but we also expect the procedures to be up to date and that they represent exactly what's going on in the organization at that moment. Okay. At the end, for the business owners, we provide them a checklist just to confirm that they're not missing anything in the process for us. In addition, Maritza, can we go back to that slide just really quick? In addition, we decided, and you also have a handout on this, you have what's called a fraud tree handout. Okay, this handout will tell you the different types of fraud that exist, and it tells you all the schemes that fall under each of those 3 major categories. So in this matrix, we ask the business owner, if you were a thief, pretend you're a thief and you want to get the system to do whatever you want to your benefit, what would you have to do? And we make them put that risk down there, fraud risk, in the matrix, and tell us what control do we have in place to prevent someone from performing fraud in our system. So we have that in there as well in our matrices. And the auditors come in and they test that as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, who's involved? This isn't something that just auditor and controller takes care of, and the internal auditors and the external auditors. This goes across the organization, across all business groups, because it involves all the departments. It involves the FRAC team, which is us that are there testing all this information and reviewing all this documentation, management at the auditor and controller, internal and external auditors, and all the departments. And when it comes down to signing the final documents, we want the general managers, the top people, to be the ones that put their signature on those documents. We go as high as we can within each of the business processes. Next page, please. And we're going to give you some stats so you can get a feel for how big the project is. We have 28 business areas. We have 336 processes, which comes up to around 448. So as you can see, if I wanted to print all these processes, I would have a big stack of paper of all these flow charts that details all the processes in detail with swim lanes where all the key controls are in place. We have 222 of these 336 involve the departments. All the departments for the county are playing in this. 100 of those 336 involve external agencies or entities, schools, banks, brokers, etc. Okay, 14 out of the 336 will involve internal auditor core teams, which is just internally with the auditor and controller. Okay, we have 1,381 key controls. There's a difference between a key control and a non-key control. A key control are those items, those controls that if I don't do this, something bad is going to happen. So we care about the key controls. We let some non-key controls land on the matrix because they're considered important, but we zero in on the key controls. Those are the ones we care about. Now, we have a total of 1,092 controls, and if you're doing the math, you're probably saying, how can you have 1092 and yet now you're telling me that 1381 are key? It's because some of the controls are repeated in multiple charts. So you can see the same control in different places on the charts. Okay, there's a key versus non-key. We have 733 that are key controls and 359 that are considered non-key controls across all these documents. We have 588 of these 192 are preventive, which means that we can prevent this risk from occurring up front. We have a way of doing it. And 504 out of those are detective. Now, the reason why we can have something happen is, for example, if you run a job in the system does what the system does, and there's no human intervention when a job is run in the system. But we can catch if the system did something wrong or if there's something that was entered incorrectly in the system and the job reveals that process, we can detect it. And we detect it through our analysis, to reconciliations, to report running, when people run reports the next day and they review the output. So we have detective controls and preventive controls on that matrix. There's ways for us to catch the risks in the system. And then within our FRAC process, we have our own additional control objectives within this reporting objective that we work with. Okay, 176 of these controls are related to what we call segregation of duties. Segregation of duties are very important because you never want to have the same employee run the process from start to finish. You want to be able to have multiple people involved in the process. Someone approves it, someone signs it, another person enters it, another person receives the goods. Exactly. So we want everything to be properly segregated and separate so that one person does not have control of the whole process. Okay, we have 173 of the 1092 are related to safeguarding county assets. 272 of those are related to authorizing transactions. In most cases, we require 2 signatures, emails, something that says this person authorized it and this person is taking the action, and another person looked at it before it goes out the door. Okay, especially if we're talking about money. 680 out of the 1092 are related to accuracy. You're putting things in the right account, in the correct fund, in the correct period, and completeness of the transaction. You're going from beginning to end. You're populating all the fields as they're supposed to be populated. And that way, when I do the reporting, everything lands in the right place and we don't have misstatements in our financial statements. Okay, next slide. As a quick summary, the FRAC is it's an annual internal control project that addresses the internal controls for the county, and especially for that reporting objective that we have in the coastal cube. It is part of the CAFR audit. We can't get away with it. We have to do it every year. We do not have a choice. It's a 3-phase model that we use for risk assessment, audit review, and risk control. We have 28 business areas. Now, what happens with the business areas, every year we take a look to see, do we need to add more, delete some, combine some, which we did in the past before. We actually had to combine a few because one of the departments no longer exists and it was taken by another department. So we had to combine those necessarily. So we're constantly looking at these business areas and those audits, that process is there. One of the jokes around the county is, are you getting fracked? They are. And we enjoy it. It's very interesting and it's very informative when you have access to all these documents and you can see all the wonderful things that the county does and all the knowledge that they have regarding their internal controls. Next slide, and this is where you guys get to ask me questions. Yes. I see one hand.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. A lot of information. I want to go back and think about a risk that we would face and how it fits into all this. For example, I could see a risk is we hire out services, somebody to provide some type of service, and then they fraudulently submit expenses for which they want to be compensated. So is that our responsibility to catch that, or are there controls, or I guess how does that fit into this? How do we know that a fraud has occurred? But this is after the fact, right? So I don't know.
Well, it's also in there. Let me tell you how that works. So if purchasing is probably going to be one of your business areas. Okay, so in purchasing, they go through a process to select the vendor. You just can't pick the vendor you want. You have to go through an official process to get the vendor. Okay, also as part of purchasing, your contract must be complete. You're telling them what kind of services you're willing to pay for. What you're paying for are on that contract. Okay, if you have a budget, the budget lines will tell you exactly what type of services you are willing to pay. And when you submit your claim, it has to be on your budget and it can only be with that vendor. So right there, you have the right vendor. Now, accounts payable, the accounts payable business area, that's where you get the invoice from this company or from this vendor. Someone is to receive or to confirm and validate that that service that's on that invoice was received and done. Okay, so
are we going to do that then?
Yes.
Because we're the consumer of the services, I guess?
Correct.
Okay.
Just like you would when you hire someone to do something in your home, you're not going to pay them until you see that it's done, that you receive the service.
Is that an item that we'll have to have a motion in a public meeting? I guess maybe that's Andrew or somebody else.
Yes, so if I may jump in on that. So using that same example that Gabby just shared, which is that vendor, we would have a separate contract monitor that is responsible for doing unannounced site visits, doing any reviews, ensuring that those services were received and signing off. And so there's multiple components of that before it's actually paid and once it's invoiced. So there's already processes. That's where staff can help support the process. Once an RFP, for example, is submitted, we'll have a contract monitor assigned.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Does
that would be
answer the
staff.
question?
Yeah, I think so. So there are county staff allocated to monitoring contractors to ensure provision of services is appropriate.
Correct.
And jives with billing. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and your RFP will be very important. The more detail you provide on that RFP, the better off you're going to be. Any other question?
Yes, Gabby, this is Commissioner Pons.
Yes.
Hey, thanks a lot for your very detailed and in-depth presentation. So this FRAC process, this is a standardized process that the county uses. Yes. But what we are doing, the IRC, is a non-standard process. So have you had to add any additional components to those existing 28 components to accommodate what we are doing?
Your project integrates within existing business areas, so we wouldn't have to. If you were doing anything different than what other entities within the county are doing, then yes, I would definitely want to frack you. Every time we have a new system, we have a new process, we're on it. We want to make sure it's on the list. But you're so far as I know, you're within the business processes that we already have in place. You're going to be making payments. You're going to be contracting somebody. You're going to be putting money your money's in the county. So you're already going through the cash management business process as well. So you're in there right now. Unless something else comes up that tells me that you're not within an existing business process, then I wouldn't put a new one in.
Thank you. And the second question and last question is, I'm going back to what Jack said, and that's the frequency of the audits, the internal audits. Because, you know, who determines that frequency? Quarterly, monthly, or is there based on a spot check based on some event that happened that triggers an audit?
This particular audit related to the FRAC is triggered by our financial statement. So we know that in order for us to get a clean opinion into this book, we must have internal controls and they must be audited. So FRAC goes that way. Now, if you want to have something different, you can always have our internal auditors come up with some kind of a plan for that. But here's what really needs to happen. When you approve a payment for something on the amount of money that you have for your resources, to have like a monthly status report, financial status report, is a very good way for you to see, how's my money going? Is it coming in, coming out? And every time you guys meet, you can request a financial status report. And it will go into the system, pull out the data from the system. It will show you your budget. You can get budget reports out of the system. You can get expenditure reports out of the system. You can see exactly how your money is coming down as you spend it. And that's important for you. And that's very important for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that might be a great segue, if there's no other questions, into the second piece of this, which is where Nicole's going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, I do want to thank Gabby. Gabby, your passion and energy for finance is amazing. So, I mean, really, that's the kind of finance person you want, right? Someone who's really passionate about it. Yes. So, and I appreciate you being on late this evening. I know after a long day of work, so we do appreciate it. And of course, Tracy's support from the county. But no problem. Before I transition to Nicole, I just want to see if there was any last questions for Gabby before we go to Nicole. And I also wanted to know for our public that there was a glitch with the system. We think it's fixed, so we're hoping that the public can now see all of us. So hopefully that's been fixed. But Gabby, thank you so much.
I'd like to say thank you
Gabby.
for not reading the slides to us. I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to know more, we can go deep on this.
Commissioner Serban, did you have a comment before I transition to Nicole?
Oh, no, I was just saying bye.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you again, Gabby and Tracy.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to transition to Nicole. You all may recall she did a presentation back in December on the budget. I think some of the questions that just came up, we asked her to come back and do a little bit deeper dive. She serves as one of our co-managers, and she is one of the few, if not maybe the only one at this point, that had experience from 10 years ago when we did redistricting. So without further delay, I'll transition it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Barbara. And also, I want to thank Gabby for an excellent presentation about the county's internal controls and all the work the county staff goes through. Bureaucrats do a lot behind the scenes, so I wanted to just thank you in person for all of that. I am definitely pleased to return to the commission today to talk more about the budget. Let me first begin with a bit of history. A decade ago, the county spent approximately $500,000 on redistricting efforts. At that time, redistricting was a totally different undertaking, with an advisory committee appointed by the Board of Supervisors and a project and procurement directed and managed totally by county staff. The Redistricting Advisory Committee was not responsible for budget review or approval. But looking at historical financial reports tells us a couple of things. First off, that the majority of spending at that time in 2011, or about $400,000 of a approximately $500,000 budget, was for contracted services and software. IT costs made up about $40,000 of that spending. Those are county IT costs. And then the other costs are comprised, other miscellaneous costs comprised the remaining approximately $40,000 of that budget. In addition to the FRAC information that Gabby presented, our staff, myself and Liberty, spoke with the county auditor and controller about an audit, as was raised by the commissioners at the December meeting. The county's overall expenditures, $6.5 billion budgeted this year, they're subject to an annual audit, an annual external audit at the end of each fiscal year. And also we have an internal Office of Audits and Advisory Services that performs various internal audits for the county. The county OAAS, as we call them, Office of Audits and Advisory Services, may perform a year-end audit of redistricting expenditures or conduct a review by applying agreed upon procedures upon request by the commission. Any costs for an external audit are not included in the redistricting budget. We researched the redistricting budget actions of 15 other jurisdictions in California as requested by the commission. Of those with available information that have established budgets, the amounts range from $125,000 in the city of Chula Vista to nearly $12 million for the California Redistricting Commission. Comparable budgetary information for independent county redistricting commissions in California was not available. But the City of San Diego's Independent Commission does have a budget of about $450,000, a little over $450,000. The only jurisdiction that established a budget-related subcommittee made up of commissioners is the state. So as you know, the California Elections Code requires the Board of Supervisors provide reasonable funding and staffing for your independent commission. And last October, the board established county funds of $750,000 as a preliminary budget for the commission's work. None of these funds have been expended yet. If we can pull up the budget, thank you, Maritza, for having that. I'll briefly cover the budget expenditure categories and staff estimates of needs through 2021. So first, for contracted services. This includes legal representation and the contracts that will result from the commission's competitive procurement processes. Similar to 2011, this is the largest category of anticipated expenditures. Budgeted amounts for individual contracts that have not yet been issued will be determined through the competitive procurement and contract negotiation processes. Next, we have information technology to support the commission. This includes estimates of monthly charges from the county's IT contractor for items such as laptops, hosting the existing website, and other needs. And I'm anticipating the cost for the laptops to begin this month. So we'll see those hopefully in next month's report. Next, costs for translation of materials and interpretation of meetings for public access, including, as Barbara mentioned, the translation of agendas that are posted on the commission's website. In this category, we've estimated costs from the county's contractor based on the commission's regular meeting schedule and the translation requirements of the California Elections Code. This amount, provides for in-person interpretation of all 8 required languages at all commission meetings upon request from the public, but actual requests may be less. The next category includes any training costs for commissioners and county staff, such as registration fees. We have a minor amount budgeted in this category. We also have a placeholder category for any costs that may be associated with future in-person public hearings, such as room rental fees. There's no amount budgeted in this category as the needs are unknown at this time. And lastly, a minor amount budgeted for other services and supplies for unanticipated needs. So the line item for staff here is at the bottom of this spreadsheet, includes an estimate of current county staff time assigned to redistricting. I'll note that a staff year, as listed here for the county, is the equivalent of 1 permanent employee working full-time for 1 year. The budgeted amount here is a sum of the staff time assigned to redistricting from various individuals. There is no cost for staffing to the commission, as this is paid by the county outside of the redistricting budget. It is anticipated that staffing assigned to redistricting will increase as the project moves forward. With the commission's approval, county staff plans to bring a monthly budget status update to the commission in a similar form to today's item. At that time, the commission can review budgeted amounts, any expenditures paid in the previous month, any projected expenditures which will be added to the budget, and any invoices or other documentation. The monthly budget status update provides your commission an opportunity to provide concurrence for all non-administrative items on county staff's administration of the redistricting budget on the independent commission's behalf. It provides regular and ongoing transparency in reporting to the public and accountability over the use of public funds. As Gabby's presentation detailed, the responsible stewardship of public funds and ongoing fiscal stability is of critical importance to the county, and the priority of myself and all county staff for redistricting, as it is in all county operations. Staff is here to support your independent commission in the achievement of your goals and responsibilities, and to ensure transparency, accountability, and appropriate use of public funds for this effort. I'm looking forward to an ongoing conversation with the commission about the budget, which is at your direction. Subject to your questions, this concludes the presentation on the budget, and I'll turn over now back to Chairman Bain.
Yeah, Nicole, I have a question. This would be like a variance report we could see every month. These line items, we could see that. The other question I have, the $495,000, which are contracted services, that would be divided between the demographic mapping RFP and the public outreach RFP. Is that correct?
And any other contracts that may be considered by the commission.
Okay. So that will change. That will come down from that line into some of those other line items. Then that $495,000.
Once we have that negotiated and available for the public, yes, that's the intention.
Yeah, does that give potential bidders kind of a heads up that hey, there's about $250,000 for each RFP if they divide? I don't know if that does that give them some sort of a heads up as to, well, how much they could bid into it, or what we're willing to pay? That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. But thank you, Nicole.
I'll just remind you that the amount that's identified here is also contemplating the potential for future contracts as well.
Okay, good. All right.
For example, translation or any other anything else that.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just call out what I've seen, which is Commissioner Katerina, Vice Chair Diaz, Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Serban. That's the order I have right now. So Commissioner Katerina, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Nicole, thank you very much for the presentation. It was great. My question was related to some of the costs that end up getting rolled up into the contracts. So for example, if there were materials that needed to be printed or rooms that need to be rented, can we assume that those costs would show up under the consultant's fees if that was part of their responsibility?
If I may jump in on that one. So yeah, if depending on what's included in the RFP and what's negotiated, then that would, if that was part of what the contractor needed to provide as part of that contract, it would all be under that contracted fee, not separated out. Did I answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Very good, Vice Chair Diaz.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. My question actually was, I see that legal expenditures take quite a significant chunk of the budget. And it was mentioned earlier that none of that has been spent. I just want a clarification on what has been spent so far, and if that is going to be presented at the next monthly update for the budget.
Commissioner Diaz, you are correct. None of those invoices have been paid yet. In particular, the council ones are in transition. We're still signing off on those and reviewing those. I'll note that we probably under anticipated the number of hours and the number of staff council that we needed to get us going. And to answer your second part of the question, any of those invoices as they come forward and are approved, then you would see it on the monthly update if that's the direction the commission would like to go, that Nicole would then report out on. So we have not paid any of those yet, and that's why that's not reflected on there. Just like the laptops, we haven't paid those yet, but we've distributed all the laptops. So as soon as those are paid, you'll see that in that bucket as well.
Okay. I guess my other question too is how did the county arrive at that number? Was that based on the other jurisdictions and more or less what they spent, or how did you arrive at that?
The total budget that we went to the board to get approval for. Yeah, Nicole, you want to talk a little bit about our estimates? And that was all in the board letter as well, but if you want to dive into that a little bit, Nicole.
Sure. Barbara, Commissioner Diaz, Vice Chair Diaz, I'm sorry. We looked at the amount of money that the county spent 10 years ago for redistricting, understanding there was a lot of uncertainty and that this is a different type of system. We looked at inflation as well as the increase in costs in county professional services over that decade, and then did an estimate that was somewhere between those two numbers that we felt was a reasonable amount to get the commission started.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may add, I apologize, just to finish that thought, is the board letter does indicate, and we're happy to resend it again, that, you know, if the commission needs, and as we're going through this budget process, we need to go back to the board. We have the flexibility of going back to our board of supervisors for any additional funds that might be needed if we reach that point.
And Barbara, I do think it would be worthwhile to resend that letter just so we've all got it in front of us. Thank you for that. Commissioner Inman, sorry.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. It's just a timing question, I suppose. So this is an update on the budget, right? So we're going to get this the second Thursday of next month, then once a month. You said monthly update. So I was just wondering how frequent would we see this report? I guess that's my question.
That was my intention. That was month to month, but it's up to the commission, really. If the commission would like to see something on a different time frame, it's really at your direction.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Commissioner Serban?
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the wonderful presentation, Nicole. I know that took a lot of time, so I appreciate it. I think I heard earlier that there was and also Gabby, very love the energy. The earlier I heard mention that the fiscal year for the county ends June and then starts again in July. So this budget, is it until the end of June, and then are we working with a new budget at the beginning of July?
I haven't structured the budget that way, primarily because the commission only has 1 year to do its job. So the amount that was envisioned as a preliminary budget was envisioned to cover the entire calendar year of 2021, thinking that county staff internally would manage the processes and procedures that we would need to roll over any funds from one fiscal year to another and ensure that those payments are properly made across fiscal years.
So if at some point before July, or I guess maybe my question is, when does the county decide when is the county do the budgeting process?
Budget hearings are in June. Staff, of course, is working well ahead of that time to put the budget together. So it would be within the next couple of months that the commission would want to discuss if additional funds are needed in the 21-22 fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you anticipating my question.
Yeah. And I think, Nicole, if I'm not mistaken, this the 750,000 that was already approved actually went in separate apart from the last year's, just because of the timing. So we have that flexibility if needed as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah. And I think, Nicole, if I'm not mistaken, this the 750,000 that was already approved actually went in separate apart from the last year's, just because of the timing. So we have that flexibility if needed as well.
Very good. Not seeing any other hands up. Let me just ask one question and just a suggestion. So do I understand, and my thanks as well to both Nicole and Gabby, fantastic presentations, making sense of very, very technical things. Is it correct to say that if we are concerned or if something looks like there might be some fraudulent activity or an emerging problem, OAS, am I getting the initial right, could take a look at it? Is that kind of an on-request function?
I forgot I have control of the monitor. Our internal auditors are available all the time. So you're certainly, as a commission, you'd be welcome to request their services at any time. Obviously, it'd have to go through the proper channels to get that done.
And then, and again, please feel free feedback, and fellow commissioners feel free. But to Commissioner Serban's point, I would just remember that with the continuing changes to when the census data becomes available and what that means for our work, we are likely to have continuing adjustments going on. And Nicole, that's why I'm so glad you're offering to provide us updates whenever we need them, because we may need to look at that a little bit and trying to figure out, okay, are we front loading then? Or are we front loading later? To Commissioner Russ's point, I feel like it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, just because something's budgeted, if we can find a less expensive way to do it using public money, I think we would all be in favor of doing so. And I would just note, we have an advantage, I think, compared to some commissions where we have a lot of the staff work being done by county staff, whereas at least one or two other commissions, I think, are actually hiring outside consultants or staff to do some of this work. So there's some efficiencies going on, but I think a lot of this discussion will continue, including in our very next agenda item, and as many of the commissioners brought out. And I'm very grateful for the wonderful discussion. I am going to ask for a motion shortly to approve the redistricting line item budget in its current form. Before I do that, let me just ask again if there are any further clarifying questions, and then turn to Andrew for public comment. Let me call on Commissioner Brown, then Vice Chair Diaz.
My question would be, is there any previous budgets, completed budgets, where it's going to be similar to our situation here, where we can kind of anticipate how much the expenses will be for different areas? Or is it just change according, it goes according to whatever we end up doing? Do we need to have some kind of a guideline as to what to expect in what we would spend on mapping and so forth, or what we would spend on in the different areas? Is there something that can kind of guide us a little bit on that? Or rather than just saying, well, I guess this sounds like a good bid, and not really knowing whether it's a good bid?
Sure.
That's up for grabs.
Yeah, I was going to say, Commissioner Brown, and I know Rick Richards on from our Department of Purchasing and Contract, but in a non-contracting sort of way, what I would say to that is my understanding is when we're doing this RFP process, and that's why it's so important, those best offers, those reviews, those ranges are all taken into account as part of the entire RFP process. So hopefully that answers your question. So, if we only get one request or vendor proposal in and it's way out there, it's always looking at those best offers as well, in consideration of all the other things.
Okay.
Vice Chair Diaz?
My question was regarding the training line item, because it seemed like an area that did not, for me, it looked like it had very little, it's just blank. So is the anticipation that as the census data is released, that we will definitely have more public hearings, but my concern is that there may not be any funding out. The fact that there's nothing there right now just kind of concerns me. So I don't know if there was a reason for that.
That line item, Vice Chair, was intended to support training costs for commissioners. So if you attended a training and had a registration fee to pay, we didn't anticipate that would be a very large amount, which is why so many of the trainings are free and publicly available, or it's resource materials that are available online. We knew we were intending to have speakers as well, so it's a small amount. But if that's not appropriate, it's certainly the Commission's purview to reconsider those amounts.
And for public hearings, the line item for that, is there?
Yeah, and that's we don't, there's so much uncertainty with public hearings that we didn't really have a way to estimate what those needs were going to be. Not just because of the pandemic, but with the logistics and planning. So that'll continue to develop as the landscape unfolds. Yeah. So I'll be proposing, if there's a change that needs to be made there, I would propose that to the Commission then for your consideration.
Just to add on to that, 10 years ago, we utilized other council chambers around the region and other cities for public hearings. And so we might be able to use locations that in other city halls that are free to us to utilize.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, just to elaborate a little bit more, I had on Commissioner Diaz's last two comments. I also noted the small amount allocated to training, understanding that it was for us. I understood that was what that was for. It still looked to me like a small number, but I don't really have any context to evaluate that. And then the zero, the no resources allocated for public hearings. I guess I'm curious to know if staff or any of the other commissioners feel comfortable about that, whether or not it might be wise to at least have some money in the public hearings line item, just to have there. And I guess the question that I have is, if we decide and are able in the future to have public hearings, and we need to find some funds for that, does that mean that we're going to be looking for additional money, or will we be reallocating it from one of the other categories?
So Nicole, I can try and then you can jump in. We're on the same. Yes.
I wasn't sure if that was me or the Commission.
Yeah, and again, this was our starting point. We were looking back 10 years. What were the funds? Now, because of the pandemic, usually when you're doing the public hearings, your costs are going to be in any beverages or food that's provided at the service, at the area, the rental, if there is a rental, by leveraging either county, city locations, and knowing we're not doing the in public events right now. That's why there's zero. But yes, to answer your question, Commissioner Garcia, if we needed to plan, or if there's more comfort in having some of the funds noted there, we can easily move that from within. This is all very guesstimate based on 10 years ago and all of that. Plus, we don't have the RFPs yet, and that's where you're going to get probably the biggest bulk of it. So once we start that process, that will also help guide the rest of the process.
Yes, and you're correct to your main point. We would look at budget status at the time that we had those costs, and either reallocate from another area where we think we're going to have unexpended funds, or we would add it to a request for additional funding.
I have Commissioner Serban and then Commissioner Pons.
So is my understanding correct then that this is a fluid process? I mean, is the 750 number that we have right now is the number that is meant to carry us through this calendar year. But if at some point we determine that we need additional funding, then are we able, how do we go about doing that?
Staff would go back to the Board of Supervisors. So based on what's been expended, what we're projecting, that would be a shortfall, for lack of a better term, what those needs are, what the situation is, then we would work closely to prepare a board letter that staff would then bring forward before the Board of Supervisors for approval.
Okay, and I guess I don't know, I'm happy to talk about this among the full commission as much appetite as there is for it. I also think that the upcoming item might address whether this is a topic that's better addressed in an ad hoc subcommittee, for example. So I'm happy to take the rest of this discussion in that direction as well.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Commissioner Pons, and then I'd like to see where we are. Please, sir.
Now, I just want to apologize to Commissioner Russ for calling him Jack initially. So my apologies. And regarding the question from Commissioner Garcia, I am hoping that we will have a training subcommittee stood up to identify the topics. And then from there, we will get some sort of rough estimate of the price and associated with those training topics and the periodicity for those. Thank you.
Frank, you can call me Jack anytime. Don't worry about it.
Very good. Any other comments? I'm sorry, Commissioner Larson.
Yes, I thought the presentations were really good, and the discussion we've just been having is also really informative. I think from what I heard this morning at the 3-hour workshop, would suggest that the state data probably isn't going to come until the midsummer. That means that the bulk of our expenditure is going to be in the next fiscal year. And I'm glad to hear that the money will carry over for that. But I think our times are going to be compressed in the fall and the winter to come up with the final product that we are required to come up with. So let's just all understand this is very dynamic, and we might want to change the budget on a monthly basis based on just what's happening in the real world that we operate in.
Thank you for that. All right. Let me ask Andrew if there are any requests from the public to speak.
There are no requests to speak on this item.
Very good. To discuss the item further, and I'm really glad we had that discussion, but I'm also cognizant of the time and the remaining agenda items. I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the current version of the budget. I'd be happy to entertain a motion to add any caveat that would make commissioners feel comfortable. I do think there's agreement that approval does mean it's a continuing it'll be under continuing review, particularly when we don't have the RFP cost built in yet. Frankly, I've heard enough from the commission that I think a motion at whatever level of detail would be in order. But let me ask first if anyone wants to make a motion or if we need to discuss what that motion looks like first.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as is.
Okay, Commissioner Chen moves to approve as is. Is there a second? Commissioner Hanson? Very good. Is there discussion on approving it as is?
Would like to see that variance report monthly, though. I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. So I think that's understood, and I'll ask staff if that's covered within the way things have been discussed and presented, that I think that's part of the motion.
Okay.
Good. Any other comments? Very good. In that case, Andrew, would you please find an order for the vote and call it? Thank you.
Happy to do that. All right, Commissioner Katarina.
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Chair Bain.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons. Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Serban,
So to clarify, the motion is to approve as proposed with continuing monthly review, right?
Correct.
Okay, aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Very good. Thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you again, staff, and Gabby in particular, and Rick for listening so carefully. Very, very useful. Look forward to continuing discussions on this. Okay, turning now to item 7. Ad hoc committee presentation of competitive procurement process for demographic mapping services and public outreach services, option 3, and selection of procurement option. As you'll recall, at our last meeting on January 14th, the commission formed an ad hoc committee that included Commissioners Brown, Hanson, Inman, Krugliak, Larson, and Russ to meet and present a third option for procurement as an actionable agenda item for today's meeting. I'm going to thank them in advance for some remarkably quick and detailed work. It is greatly appreciated, and I'm sure we'll have a good discussion. As we turn to the item, I would request that the ad hoc committee feel free to clarify anything that might be misunderstood or might need a little additional explanation, such as which option 1 we're talking about and other things that just will help frame the discussion. But for right now, this item is an opportunity for the commission to hear the recommendation from the ad hoc committee, ask clarifying questions. We'll hear from public speakers upon request and discuss the ad hoc committee's option for proceeding with the competitive procurement process. With that in mind, I'll turn now to Commissioner Krugliak to speak on behalf of the ad hoc committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Boehm. And thank you for the presentation. Okay, great. So I'd first like to thank my fellow subcommittee members for meeting so quickly and so productively. It was quite a pleasant experience. So for everyone else who gets the opportunity to work on such a subcommittee, I think you all will enjoy it very much. I'd also like to especially thank Barbara Jimenez for her really quick turnaround. Anytime we had a question, her and her team's quick review on our recommendation on our proposal is very much appreciated. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is basically what has just been said. We met to review the option 1 and option 2 that were presented by county at the last meeting and potentially create a third option, taking into account the feedback to those 2 options, as well as the original proposal that was presented to us back in December, and also at the same time consider the whether we would want to consider separating the demographer and mapping services RFPs, which had been brought up as well. So if you could go to the next slide, please. The goals that we were working off of were first and foremost to really ensure that this entire process was subject to a very high level of public input so that we could make sure that it was an open process and we were taking in public feedback as much as possible. We wanted to ensure increased participation by the full IRC, but at the same time not cause a significant delay in the final contract award. And finally, we did want to still allow for a confidential offer selection process, however, have it be based on very public and open selection criteria to protect the overall integrity of the process. If you could go to the next slide, please. So our proposal is a modification from what was presented as option 1 on January 14th. So I'm going to verbally take you through the process that we have proposed. And on the slide after the verbal description here in bullets, there's actually a table that puts our options side by side with option 1 and highlights the key differences between the 2. So the process that we envision begins with the creation of 2 ad hoc subcommittees, 1 per RFP. And the deliverable of each of these subcommittees is to finalize the RFP document. So the RFP now comes under, becomes a deliverable of the IRC. The subcommittee would be composed of 3 IRC members, 1 with direct RFP experience, because we do have several committee members who do have such experience, and 2 others selected by random draw. County staff would provide this subcommittee with the current drafts of the evaluation criteria, submittal requirements, and statement of work, as well as other relevant supporting documents, including corresponding or equivalent RFPs from other commissions throughout the state. The subcommittee would then work very diligently to create a draft RFP that would be presented for public comment at an industry procurement day, which was a very nice idea brought forward by the county last time. And the RFP would include very detailed scoring criteria for offeror evaluation, which is a key point that I will continue to highlight. After incorporating relevant applicable feedback from the industry procurement day, the subcommittee would revise the RFP and present the RFP draft to the full IRC at a public IRC meeting. At that point, the IRC would either adopt or reject the draft. If it was rejected, the process would repeat. The subcommittee would go back, revise the RFP, and repeat the process. If it were adopted, then the subcommittee would be dissolved, having completed its task, and then the RFP would be posted as soon as possible. On the next slide, please. After the RFP is posted for 2 weeks to allow offers to respond, a confidential SSC would be convened to score the offers. The SSC would be composed completely of county staff, but the scoring would be performed following the IRC defined criteria in the final RFP. And so I want to highlight that the level of scoring, the detail of scoring is completely under IRC control. County staff would be presenting an award recommendation after scoring according to those criteria. The recommendation would be presented at a public, full, regular IRC meeting, and the full IRC would be reviewing that recommendation. If the IRC concluded that the scoring criteria were applied accurately, then we would concur with the recommendation. If we concluded that the scoring criteria were not applied accurately, then we would reject the recommendation and the process would repeat. And the SSC could either come back to us with a revised recommendation or another proposal for how to proceed. Upon our concurrence of the award recommendation, county staff would finalize and award the contract to the winning offeror after successful negotiations. So on the next slide, this option, which we just call the Ad-Hoc Subcommittee option, is laid next to option 1 from the January 14th meeting. You see the key difference is that the RFP is not created across all 14 IRC members across 3 different meetings. There is a single ad hoc subcommittee to ensure that this process can move quickly and effectively rather than taking up more meetings of the IRC. The industry day, the industry procurement day for public feedback remains. After the IRC creates the RFP, the key difference is that there is an SSC created composed of county staff to score offers, and it remains a confidential process. Award recommendation is presented to the full IRC for review and concurrence. The potential impacts are the same, and our best guess is that the timeline would also be the same rather than the delay to May that was foreseen in option 2. But that would be dependent on review by county staff. So we also have on the next slide, we also have a recommendation on splitting or separating the Demographer mapping services RFP, and we did not recommend any change to the current format. After review, we concluded that these 2 functions are very, very tightly linked, that the successful offer should provide both, either directly or via a contractor, and we also didn't see any examples of those 2 functions being split. However, in the event that calling it Demographer and Mapping Services lends itself to suggesting different deliverables, it makes sense to clarify the title just to refer to Demographer Services, where the mapping services are under that broad heading. So that's a summary of our proposal, and I and my fellow subcommittee members would be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Kruglik, if it's okay, I'll try to help you keep an order of requests, but I'll just turn it over to you. And
Please do.
And for what it's worth, I just wanted to remind, for this portion of the discussion, I'd really appreciate it if we could stay to clarifying questions so that members of the public then have a chance to weigh in, and then we'll have a discussion with an emotion. So with that, I see Commissioner Pons, then Commissioner Chen, then Commissioner Serban. Please.
Okay, some great work. I had a chance to review it several times and to get my head wrapped around it. So if I understand it, option 1 is actually option 4 because there were 3 previous options and courses of action. Is that correct?
Option 1, so the left-hand column of the table that I presented on slide 5, I believe.
Yes.
If we look at the agenda material from the January 14th meeting, that is what county had proposed as option 1 at our last meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, great. So I understand now. So my question to the commissioners is just this. Obviously, we must have felt there was something wrong with the existing RFP process, either the integrity of the process, the existing process, or the people associated with it. So I'm just trying to understand what brought us here, not discounting the great work, but what got us here to having to standing up this subcommittee to review the RFP process?
If I may address that, we did talk about that at the very beginning of our subcommittee meeting. And our concurrence was that on the original proposal that was presented to us in December, where it was the traditional county SSC process composed of, where the SSC was composed of 3 county members and 3 commissioners, 2 of whom had voting rights, 1 of whom was a technical advisor. And the RFP was completed by county prior to posting. Some of the feedback that was raised was that it limited the number of IRC members who were involved in the process, that the number of IRC commissioners in that SSC was small, and that the full IRC was not providing significant feedback into the RFP. And so at our last meeting, county staff did some great work coming back with what was a very out-of-the-box proposal to ensure that the IRC had detailed input into the RFP process, and that the selection process of contract award could either be done in a confidential manner in a way that was consistent with what we had requested, or was brought fully into the public at IRC meetings and everything was debated completely in public. The feedback from last week's meeting was that potentially there was a middle ground where the RFP process could have significant IRC input. The full IRC could, but not at the expense necessarily of very long meetings iterating over a document with 14 members over Zoom, that we could make use of the industry review day to get significant public feedback, but then also that potentially there was a way to still keep the confidentiality process in making an ultimate selection.
Thank
you. Commissioner Chen.
Great work, Christina and the team. I think it's much more workable than we had before. One question. So you have the SSC scoring the RFP and then the IRC reviewing their scoring to see if we think they scored it correctly. Does that mean that the IRC is going to see all of the proposals that were submitted so that we can review those ourselves? That seems like I don't know how we're going to tell if they applied the scoring correctly without scoring it ourselves, essentially, or doing it offline. That's my question. How do we expect that to work?
I will defer to Barbara, but that is also that's how I would have envisioned it as well, potentially with any identifying information removed.
You mean me, Barbara, or Barbara Jimenez?
Oh, sorry, Barbara Jimenez, sorry.
Yes, no, a couple of thoughts. The first one is the evaluation criteria and that sort of umbrella that the IRC is going to weigh heavily in prior to the posting of that RFP is where it's going to be very clear and how that's going to be scored by the SSC. I see Richard is on too, so he might want to add anything regarding the sharing of the proposals. I'll defer to him on that piece of it.
Yeah, obviously we would have to work out some of the mechanics of that. But what I envision is, I mean, our typical process is we write what we call a source selection committee report. So it's a fairly detailed summary evaluation of, you know, the criteria that has been defined to be scored. And we use a tool that objectively, you know, applies that criteria. So I envision that that would be what is presented to the committee for review. So that will contain a lot of information. If in addition to that, you wanted to see the proposals as well, we just have to figure out how we deal with the confidential information aspect, if there is any. But we could figure that mechanics out later, but that's kind of what's in my mind.
So I don't know that we need to see all the proposals. I guess just having that step in there though may raise expectations that we can second guess the SSC on how it's scored, because that's essentially what it says we're going to do. I don't know that we'll have enough information to do that. Sounds to me like we really won't. So maybe we can, I don't know, I might think about taking that step out since there's really no way for us to really do that second guessing without a lot more information. Just a thought.
I'll defer to Barbara Hanson this time for a comment.
In my experience, the key component of this is what's usually referred to as a rubric. It's a list of attributes that you have looked at specifically and graded maybe on a scale of 1 to 10 or even 1 to 3 or yes or no. I mean, how you grade it, it's that rubric that is the key component that keeps the graders of the proposals, so to speak, acting in this under the same criteria. And if we create the rubric and we understand the rubric, then there's no reason to assume that the SSC would not be following it. But we would get to see that rubric as evidence of how they graded it.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a standardized rubric. Exactly what you said is exactly what we use in our standardized process. We have a 1 to 10 rubric. There's various descriptions that would address maybe experience, technical approach, understanding of requirements, things of that nature. Obviously, that information would be provided as part of the drafts that everyone's going to be working on and finalized. So yeah, that's exactly how it would be done.
So it seems then the process is with the rubric, with the criteria that are developed ahead of time. If that is what we've already seen and approved, we really don't need to go back and second guess the SSC on whether they scored it correctly. Barbara, you're kind of saying what I was saying is that's going to be done ahead of time. We don't have to go back and second guess after they've scored.
I mean, I don't think you can create a system that assumes that the SSC is going to be cheating and then we're going to catch them at it. I mean, I don't know how else to answer that.
I agree. I'm agreeing with you. So I think we should take that step out that says that the IRC will review the scoring to see if it's done correctly. That's why I'm agreeing. I don't think that makes sense. So I'm suggesting we take that step out of the process that's been presented so that if we have the rubric we approve, if we approve the criteria, we then let the SSC do its job and accept what they've done.
Let me ask that we just stay with questions for now. I take your point, Commissioner Chen. I promise we'll come back to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Inman, did you want to speak on that as a member of the ad hoc committee?
Well, I mean, one of the key things is the scoring rubric and did they do it correctly? But the other one is just to get it out in the public's purview to see what was done in the scoring. And so I think that that was also a primary driver of why this comes back to the IRC. We're not trying to catch them cheating or just second guess their scoring. It's to put it out in a public format where others can see what was done. And so I think that the transparency and having it under review in a public format was also part of this.
So maybe just rewording that then to reflect that would be great.
Can certainly do that. Commissioner Serban, I'll beg your indulgence, but just to clarify one more time from Commissioner Inman and others. So the idea would be this document would be circulated in advance and public not only would review it, but could comment on it during that full IRC meeting, correct? That's the concept? Okay. Right now, I only have, I think, Commissioner Serban, unless Commissioner Hanson, did you want to say anything else or?
No.
Okay. So I think we have Commissioner Serban and then we'll go to public comment. Commissioner Serban.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that the subcommittee did in such a quick time. I appreciate that, and I'm sure the public does as well. I saw that we had an e-comment that was submitted, and it asked about amending our process to include a public interview of the line drawer candidates with opportunities for public comment. In reading that, do I understand that the industry day is meant to sort of fulfill that role? Is that what industry day will do?
No, the industry day is to get significant public feedback on the draft RFP for each contract. So it would be pre the offers submitting their proposals. It would be pre the RFP being posted.
Okay.
Commissioner Inman, did you want to comment on that? Or is that just a hand up? Okay, good. Any other clarifying questions? Very good. Andrew, I think now's the time to see if there are any requests from the public to address this item.
Yes, I see
Sorry,
Commissioner Garcia raising her hand.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, please.
That's okay. I was a little bit late. I'm trying to decide whether or not this is an important question to ask. So when I was reviewing this, I did have a couple of questions. One is that this proposal, first of all, it was an excellent report and very clear and well presented. It was in some ways similar to the very, very first proposal that we got from staff in December, only, or maybe similar in the number of commissioners that would be involved, right? So it's 3 commissioners on 2 different RFPs. And I appreciate what I see as a big difference is the fact that the commissioners, the ad hoc committee would actually be very much involved in drafting the RFPs and creating the criteria and all of that. So that's a big move. But other than that, I mean, the number of commissioners involved remains at 6. And so I was a little bit curious about that because as I recall in that earlier conversation in December, that was an issue that was raised because there are 14 commissioners. So that's one. And I guess the other thing that I noticed, and I think I understand why, but I noticed that the SSC would be only staff. And I understand, I would imagine, but if there's a different reason for this, please correct me. I would imagine that the reasoning for that is that the IRC ad hoc committee will have developed the criteria, all the scoring criteria. So the commission, the commissioners have been very much involved in that. So I guess it felt perfectly reasonable to then hand over the scoring to staff. So I think I understand that. One of my questions has to do with why these are now ad hoc committees when in many ways this looks so similar to that very first proposal and those were not considered ad hoc committees. So I guess I'm just maybe not being very clear, but those are some of the questions that I had and I'm wondering if someone can respond to that.
Absolutely. So those are wonderful questions, and they were high up in our process. So to your first question about the number being 6, we can change the number that are on this ad hoc committee. The reason it is ad hoc is because it is defined for a very short period of time with a very clear deliverable and will be dissolved as soon as its process is completed. And so it falls under the rubric of ad hoc committees. It is not subject to standing meeting requirements. And so it will allow the committee to move very quickly, as we were able to do. So we do see that that is successful. We did want to make sure. Go ahead.
So how is that different from the very, very first option, December, that was going to be staff and commissioners, because that wasn't considered an ad. So is this going to be just IRC commissioners? Yes, because it is a committee that we create as the IRC. It falls under an ad hoc subcommittee, whereas in the previous proposal in December, it was standard county process. It was not anything that the full IRC had an action in creating. And so now it does. So the thought process for 3 was for speed, but the reason that we had 2 review sessions, so the industry day for feedback is not limited to the public. It will be a full IRC meeting. The ad hoc committee is welcome to additionally receive comments from the full IRC. Additionally, there will be another meeting where it is presented to the full IRC to either accept or reject, at which point the full IRC will be able to ensure that all of their concerns or all of their comments from the previous meeting were incorporated satisfactorily. And if not, the ad hoc committee would go back and incorporate again. So we did feel that the full IRC actually was directly involved in the creation of the RFPs by this process, but by having an ad hoc subcommittee actually do the drafting and the iterating on potentially a large document, we thought that it would move much faster than going through and trying to do a document review over Zoom. That was the thought process for that. Your intuition about the SSE and the way it is composed is completely spot on. It also allows for the maintenance, for the maintaining of confidentiality in that process, which we could not have done otherwise. And then sorry, that was the second one. The third one, please remind me of your last comment. I think we can skip it because I've already forgotten it too.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think it was covered. So great dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted those clarifications and maybe just to be able to articulate the questions that I had. Thanks. Thanks for the time.
Any other clarifying questions? Oh, sorry, Vice Chair Diaz, please.
Thank you, Christina, for such a wonderful presentation. I just one last question. The 2 weeks to allow offers to respond to the RFP, how did you arrive? Is that timeline flexible? I mean, as far as
I think that's legally the minimum. Barbara Jimenez can correct me, but I think that's complete. That's the lower bound. I'm not sure if there's an upper bound.
So we can actually do less time, but we can also do more. So I think it's very flexible to answer the question. And Richard, did I miss anything? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, my standard is what's reasonable based on how much information you're asking them to propose, right? So that's, you want to give a reasonable amount of time to get a good proposal. So that's, it's not a rule. It's a good decision type thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Very good. Andrew, do we have any requests from the public to address this item?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Yes, we have 5 requests to speak on this item, and I will note for the record that we received 1 e-comment. We'll be calling speakers by their name, and we'll begin with Janine Ericat. And all the speakers will have 3 minutes to address the commission. And just for the record, if you could please state your name for the audio record.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Janine Ericat from the Partnership of Advancement of New Americans, PANA. I want to thank the Ad Hoc Committee for the time and effort that went to creating this alternative RFP proposal. I do, however, want to raise two serious concerns with the proposed process for review and recommendations on the best proposal. First, this proposal still does not include an interview of the final candidates, as was brought up by Commissioner Serban. The line drawer will be interacting with the public and extensively with you and under your direction. You need to determine as a commission if you have a rapport and can work with the person who will play one of the most important roles in this entire process. An interview is a critical step in the selection process, and as we've said before, should be done publicly and with the opportunity for public comment. Second, the proposed selection method essentially transfers selection authority from the IRC members to county staff. This undermines the entire spirit of the independent commission process. The proposal says commissioners need to determine if staff applied the selection criteria correctly before adopting staff recommendation. It's not clear how commissioners can do this without reviewing the proposals and applying the criteria themselves. This begs the question, what time is saved having staff review proposals if commissioners are to review staff's work? And if commissioners do not review the applications themselves, this would simply be rubber stamping staff's work, which is the functional equivalent of giving staff hiring authority. We recommend that the subcommittee reviewing proposals be comprised of commissioners only who recommend to the full commission who should be interviewed. Interviews and final selection should then happen in a public meeting, similar to the way countless other commissioners and commissions conduct their hiring process. Thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing the discussion after this.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lori Thiel.
Hi, thank you, Commissioners. Well, without reiterating Janine's comments, I do want to support what she said. I was actually the one that Commissioner Serban referenced in that public comment, requesting the public opportunities and public interview of the line drawer. As Janine was saying, I think that's an important task and it requires some interaction with the public. So I know this commission's trying to weigh and balance the needs of disclosure and transparency with, effectiveness and efficiency. As a League of Women Voters president, I am gonna lean toward transparency, and but I do appreciate this commission's struggle with that and paying attention to being transparent and providing public comment and opportunities for the public to see your work and to review it prior to your meetings. And I think this is just one more in the long line of steps you've taken to become more transparent and provide public opportunity for comment and review of your work. So again, I support everything that Janine was saying, and I appreciate the efforts that this commission has taken. Thank you.
Thank you. We also had requests to speak from Yasmin Obeid, Kiana Asamanfar, and Jonathan Meta-Stein. I don't see them in the attendee panel. If they are either of the callers, they can press *9 to raise their hand and we will call on them. Chair Boehm, seeing no virtual movement in the attendee panel, that appears to conclude public communication on this item.
Okay, thank you for that. So we now can open the floor for a discussion under a motion. The simplest option would simply be to ask for a motion to approve the option as proposed by the Ad Hoc Subcommittee. In this particular case, I would be willing to entertain a motion with something added to it, but my guess is it might be simpler to make the motion to approve as is, then have the discussion, and then we can see about amending or substituting a motion. So with that, do we have a motion to approve the option for a procurement process as proposed by the Ad Hoc Subcommittee? Commissioner Dostal?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Inman? Very good. Okay, the floor is open for discussion on the motion. Commissioner Serban.
So to address the public comments that were given, what I'd like if the subcommittee could please discuss whether the request from the public is one that's feasible for us to consider implementing within the proposed process.
Anyone want to address that? Commissioner Inman?
Well, so I understood, I mean, point taken from the public comments. I understand that, Commissioner Serban. And, you know, I guess part of it is we were trying to come up with an RFP process, period, full stop. And it potentially, one size doesn't fit all, if you will, if I can state that. And, you know, if we're trying to hire somebody who's a public speaker and never bring that person in to speak publicly, that's remiss on the part of the party that's doing the hiring. But you don't need to do that in all cases. So what I'm struggling with, I guess, based on the public comments is, you know, we have a framework for an RFP process, which, you know, I think is solid, and it addresses many of the issues that were raised for transparency and for involvement of the IRC. It does give the IRC the authority to decide whether to go forward with this proposal. So we do have authority in terms of making the decision to hire or not to hire. Now, I also understand that maybe in part of the RFP, it has to be that somebody has to stand up and do a public speaking engagement so that we can actually see that they know how to stand in front of a camera and talk in a public setting. And potentially that is part of the requirements of the RFP, that a condition of the statement of work is you give a presentation to the IRC. I don't know if that changes our proposal. That would just simply be part of the RFP that is written by this ad hoc committee. And then it has to happen that, you know, they've got to stand up in front of an IRC meeting and give a proposal. The scoring criteria then go back to the SSC, same as before, where they get scored on how successful they were in doing that presentation. You know, and so that's what I would put out there is it's kind of accommodated in the RFP process, but I understand there's some nuancing here. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'll stop there.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is that we might be able to accommodate the request for an interview of the line drawer candidates through the RFP scoring process. Okay. The other question then is there was a comment from the public as well about the composition of the SSC and it being composed of county staff and no members of the IRC. So could the subcommittee address whether that's whether that was considered and why?
Commissioner Inman, would you like me to defer to you on that one? You explained it very nicely as well.
Yeah, I can take the shot. I mean, it kind of goes back to the confidentiality of the process and sticking with county procurement policies of having you know, an autonomous body make the decision so that people can't influence those making the selection. There's also I think that was the main component, is to have an anonymous body that makes the selection so that they won't be unduly influenced, and that was county staff only. If we have IRC commissioners on that, then it's a committee created by an act of the IRC, and then it's subject to all the rules of any committee created by the IRC. So it could, and when you create a committee, I mean, Barbara can check me or if we've got the legal people on, but subcommittees of the IRC have to be only IRC commissioners. They can't be a mixing of the two. And so it's a balance between having a group that can review and score these criteria without undue influence, but still keeping the IRC in control of the ultimate decision. So we don't have members on the SSC so that it can act in the standard procurement process and not be subject to the rules that involve committees that have IRC members, but we still come back with a proposal to the IRC so that we can accept or reject the criteria that were applied and scored. I don't know if that gets, I don't know if that's confusing or not, but that's kind of the thought process that went into it.
Hillary, would you like to weigh in? You're on mute.
Hillary, I do want to get your comments in, and I want to get staff in. I just want to recognize people so they know what the order is going to be. Right now I have next Commissioner Chen, then Commissioner Garcia, then Commissioner Pons. But I'm very glad to have council and staff speak now. Thank you.
And sorry, really quick, I think Commissioner Hansen also has feedback on this particular item being on the subcommittee.
Thank you. Shall we let Commissioner Hansen go first, if that's okay, Hillary?
I just wanted to comment on one assumption that's being made here, and it's referring to these people who we are hiring as the line drawers. We are the line drawers. Am I not mistaken? We make the decision in the end of where the lines will be drawn. These people are just advising them, and we're not going to just accept for everything they say without our own impact or input on all of the other factors. So I wish we wouldn't refer to these contractors as the line drawers.
Thank you for that. Hillary?
Can you guys, are you able to hear me? I've got my audio on. Okay, good. So I think Commissioner Inman summed it up quite well, actually. The way that the SSC was structured was an attempt to balance the concerns of the Brown Act, which puts certain constraints on the ability to do things confidentially when you have a committee that is working outside of a standard county process and is created by an action of the IRC and is set up via IRC input and action, which in this case it would be, and is composed of, it's not an ad hoc committee composed solely of IRC members, it is composed of a mix of county staff and IRC. And so the structuring of the process here to have a staff only SSC was meant to address the various considerations, kind of non-legal but policy considerations that Commissioner Inman raised and discussed quite well, but also the legal consideration of how to balance these concerns of confidentiality, the Brown Act, and the desire for public input into the various stages of the process.
Thank you for that. Other staff have comment? Very good. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'll just go back to the topic I brought up during the clarification session. Sorry for expanding when I shouldn't have. I think the process is great. I think as Commissioner Inman points out, there's enough flexibility in the steps that are there to address most of the issues that have been brought up. What I just think, because even some of the comments that have been made, the step where it says that after the SSCS scored, the IRC, I forget how it's worded now, I don't have it in front of me, but it said that we would essentially second guess and have the opportunity to correct their scoring. I'd like to have that change where we can review, but not set the expectation that we're going to go back and try and rescore what they've already scored. If we can make that one change, I'd be very happy with the current proposal.
Thank you for that. Not seeing anyone from the ad hoc committee who wants to respond to that immediately. I'll ask for Commissioner Garcia.
So I guess I want to go back to the point that the caller made, the speaker made about no representation from the IRC on the SSC. And I guess I'd like to understand again, what is the difference? The original December proposal that the staff brought to us had an SSC with two voting IRC members on that SSC. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they were going to be randomly selected and remain anonymous. So I guess I want to make sure that I understand that correctly, and then to ask the question of the ad hoc subcommittee if incorporating that model into the current proposal might ameliorate the concerns that were raised by the speaker, whether we think what do we think about the wisdom of doing that? And can we do that?
So my understanding, and I could be wrong, so I will defer to Ms. Gibson, was that because the process is changed by our direction, including the RFP process ahead of the SSC, we have changed the process by our direction, and therefore the original proposal is no longer a county process and is no longer an option with the changes we have made. But I will defer to Ms. Gibson if that's incorrect.
That's exactly right. That's exactly correct. There's been a shift now from just a participation in a standardized county process to a process that has been created by action of the IRC. And that changes the Brown Act considerations for the structuring of the procurement process.
Okay, and I think you just explained that a minute ago, and it was still fuzzy in my mind, but I got it now. Thank you.
That's okay. It's complicated, and there's various technicalities involved that I think that's why the work of the ad hoc committee is really great. They've done really great work to weigh those various considerations and get a process that takes them all into account.
Very good. Commissioner Pons.
Yes, again, great work by the subcommittee. I'm now sort of confused as to where we are with this process, because and it's not some nuanced changes, Commissioner Inman. I think there are some substantive changes to the process that we made. So for me to better understand what the process looks like now with those changes, maybe if Richard could go back and take the process, because you have some discussion and decision points in that process. And if it was presented in the form of a flow chart that said what the changes are and what the discussion is and what the decision points are and who's part of that decision process, I think that would help to illuminate where we are and reinforce the confidence that some of the callers have inquired about. So I would recommend that maybe we go back and ask Richard to look at the process that he briefed, create a flow chart, incorporate some of the proposals by the subcommittee, give it back to us, let us look at it and go, God, that is locked in. And it's very, you got a tremendous amount of confidence, high confidence in the process.
Richard, are you there?
Sorry, yes, I am.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can, we can structure a process as needed. We just got to be thoughtful and considered about the various steps. But yeah, absolutely.
If I'm the only one that's sort of confused on this and locked off, you don't have to do it for one of the commissioners, but I just think it's necessary at this point because it seems to be critically important to what we are doing.
Let me call on Commissioner Inman.
So I guess I appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner Pons, and fully agree with what you said. Now, my question back to staff would be, assume, or let's suppose we pass this motion. So we take a vote, it passes. Staff is going to have to operationalize this. And I believe that's what Commissioner Pons, to a certain extent, is saying is operationally, what's the project or the Gantt chart or what have you to make this actually work. I do understand that prior to approval of this RFP process, it's prudent to look at that flow chart so that we know the exact decision points. What's the project look like based on this motion? So I don't know, maybe a substitute motion would be staff, please provide what Commissioner Pons requested, and then we would then go back to either approve or not approve, or potentially approve this motion with the understanding that we would get that Gantt chart. I don't know which way to go, but that would be my comment.
Let me call on Commissioner Pons, and then I want to ask a process question before we call on staff. Commissioner Pons.
Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Inman. I just can't vote on something that I can't understand right now. So, it would be a nay because I don't understand what I'm voting on, because I don't have all the elements in place or in the proper place so I can better understand it, best understand it. So that would be the recommendation, that we go back to the existing process, the modifications that were made therein by the subcommittee, the staff represented to the commission, so we can look at it in a flow chart process, and there would be revealed visually on what we're going to vote on. But right now, I'm just not confident on what I'm voting on. And that's got nothing to do with the work, because the work is phenomenal. It's just I don't totally have a comprehensive tooth to tail appreciation of what I'm voting on.
Let me briefly thank all the commissioners for that discussion. I think that really got us to a good point there. Commissioner Pons, let me just clarify with you, and anyone else, please weigh in. At this point, you'd prefer to see a flow chart rather than have something briefly described? Because we could try to see if staff could do that, but I can understand from your tone that probably would still not be clear enough. Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair.
Commissioner Inman, did you want to say something on that? Okay. So with that in mind, let me call on Commissioner Serban, but I'm beginning to think maybe we go for a substitute motion like that, where the motion would be to task staff to produce the kind of timeline in sequence that Commissioner Pons and Commissioner Inman just laid out. I'll refine this in a moment, I promise. And if I could ask commissioners to be thinking of particular things you want to see in that timeline so that staff has a good idea of what we're asking for. Commissioner Serban, please.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, because I think the issue that I still I want to understand is why there aren't any members of the SS or the IRC on the SSC, and I think what I've heard excuse me, is because we want the deliberations of the SSC confidential, and if there are members of the IRC on the SSC, then that would require that body would have to be under the Brown Act, and we'd have to then open up those proceedings. I guess maybe what I'm wondering is, I thought in listening to the Brown Act presentation from council that if we set it up as an ad hoc committee, then we wouldn't be subject to the Brown Act, and we'd still be able to keep those proceedings confidential.
Commissioner Inman, I saw you nodding on that, and I imagine Ms. Gibson could weigh in on this. Who would like to go first, or any others? Commissioner Inman?
I mean, we struggled with this, and my thinking is, if we're trying to stay within the existing county policy with the SSC, and we did have controls in place to ensure that the criteria were clear. I don't think that we can go to a mixed group where we have some county staff and some IRC members. Having just simply an ad hoc committee do it, I mean, I guess I can't answer, maybe that's more for legal or somebody else. And I don't see why we couldn't, per what you said, Commissioner Serban, if we just said an ad hoc committee of the IRC reviews these, but potentially that violates procurement policy. I mean, I guess I don't know if there's something preventing us from simply having an ad hoc committee of the IRC, full stop. I defer to staff or procurement, I suppose.
And I guess maybe in hearing your answer, I think that maybe that's what I'm asking is whether the SSC could be composed as an ad hoc committee of the IRC. And if so, it would be composed of a mixed membership of IRC commissioners and county staff, I guess.
Let me call Ms. Gibson and then I think Vice Chair Diaz.
Yeah, so to address the Brown Act aspect of that, Commissioner Serban, to your question, the Brown Act allows for ad hoc committees that are composed solely of less than a quorum of the IRC, so solely of IRC members. Once you make it into a mixed committee with staff, then that becomes outside of the ad hoc committees that are allowed by as an exception to the Brown Act. And so if the commission wanted to consider an option where the actual selection was done, and I don't know the extent to which the ad hoc committee already kind of thought about this or worked through this, but where the actual selection is done by a committee solely of IRC members, I think that would have to potentially go back for further consideration, unless the ad hoc committee has already worked through that and kind of has some thoughts on the workability of that. But it sounded from Commissioner Inman's comment that is something that might require further consideration by the ad hoc committee to see if that's a viable approach.
Vice Chair Diaz.
Yeah, I was wondering if this would then, if we were to create a substitute motion to come back to, and I'm just posing this as an option because it seems like there's commissioners here that have some concerns about the process itself and need to come back to the full commission to present a second presentation. I don't know if the ad hoc committee right now it can address all of these concerns at this meeting, but I leave it up to maybe Commissioner Krukliak. I don't know if you agree with, because I'm also hearing Commissioner Chen bring up another issue about the was it the scoring criteria if it's not it needs to come back to the SSE for review. I mean, sorry, the commission, and to have that taken out. So I don't know if I'm representing Commissioner Chen's concern, but I don't want to forget about that. So I just wanted to see if there would be a substitute motion in order at this point to come back to the IRC, or how do we want to do that?
Commissioner
so thank you. Yeah, thank you for calling me out. I've been sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Commissioner Bain.
Yeah, I'd love you to into your answer. Would you prefer, if we go to the substitute motion, is it a motion to refer it back to the ad hoc subcommittee or to staff? I just would like your thoughts on that as you speak. Thank you.
I have a question. I think it would be for Barbara or for Hillary. I just put together a flow chart per Commissioner Pond's question. Given that I would be presenting something, is that allowed since it wasn't posted as an agenda item? I'm just wondering if, to the question of whether we could address any of these questions at the meeting today, if it might be possible to do so since that was a deliverable request.
That's fine. There's no, staff can make it available on the website afterwards, and there's no Brown Act concern with you sharing it. It's within the purview of the agenda item as it was noticed for this meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Pons, would it be okay if I a very, very quick and dirty flow chart, and mostly so that we can get your feedback on whether it is at all what you were envisioning, or if you're looking for something quite a bit different to address your concerns?
By all means, proceed, Commissioner Krugliak.
Okay, let me see. Please let me know when you can see this slide. Yes, thumbs up? Okay, great, thanks. And Commissioner Pons, feel free to propose comments as you see this. So basically, I have structured into a flow chart exactly what we've proposed and colored them according to who's responsible for what. And then where there's a key change from what was originally proposed in the process, I've tried to identify that here. So here, the creation of an ad hoc subcommittee for IRP for the RFP, and the first deliverable is a draft RFP. The key change is that was originally delivered by county staff. Now that is a deliverable of the IRC. The deliverable at first is a V1 draft. At the Industry Day for Procurements, which is a meeting of the full IRC, the public and the full IRC will provide input into that document. The subcommittee goes back and creates a draft RFP V2. That is their second deliverable that is then presented at a full IRC meeting. The deliverable at that IRC meeting is adoption of the RFP. So the final RFP, no longer a draft, but RFP v final, is the deliverable at this meeting, at which point applicants are able to submit according to the standard county process. There is no change. A key change in the previous, from the original proposal back in December, is that the RFP goes through this large round of public feedback. That is a big difference from what was presented in December. The submission process is unchanged. The SSC as an idea is unchanged. The key difference is that it is staff only, and that the criteria will be applied according to the there is no difference in the fact that the criteria will be applied per RFP. The difference is that the RFP criteria come from the IRC rather than staff. So the SSC's deliverable is a recommended hire. That is presented at a full IRC meeting, and the full IRC concurs with that recommendation. So to clarify Commissioner Chen's concern, this is not going through and just second guessing everything that the SSC does. It is a concurrence of the process. And again, to Commissioner Inman's point, there is some flexibility here to add in additional detail or additional requirements into the SOW as needed. The deliverable here is an approval motion that passes by the full IRC to hire the recommended offerer, at which point it goes back to county staff, which is unchanged from the original process, to go through negotiations for contracting and actual application, awarding of the final offer. So those are in flow charts, the process and deliverables. And the key differences, really the key differences, are this RFP change, so that it comes under the purview of the IRC, and that necessitates this change to make it a staff-only SSC to maintain confidentiality. Regarding Commissioner Serban's question about whether we had considered a IRC-only SSC in order to make it an ad hoc and therefore confidential subcommittee, I absolutely did not. I can't speak for my other subcommittee members, but given that I have no RFP experience, and I think the number of us who do have direct RFP experience is quite small, I would certainly feel more comfortable personally. Again, I don't speak for my fellow subcommittee members, with staff with such experience heavily involved in the process.
Is it over to me, Commissioner Krugliak?
Yes, that's all I've got for you.
Well, I got to tell you, that was a lot, and that was beautifully done. That was, I don't know how many minutes you were slaving in on that, but I got to tell you, that was time well spent. You don't have to bring it back up, but I would say in between some of the review process where you're going to push documents over to the IRC, I would put in a sharing process to share it in advance as a read ahead, because if we reviewed those documents, during these meetings, it would take the entire time period, 2 hours for us to review the entire process. So that would be the first recommendation. The second recommendation is because the caller brought up the issue of the interview process. If we want to accommodate that recommendation, then you could put it in the next, I think it was the third step from the end, it would fit in there before the final approval is. And that way it, puts the confidence back that the caller called in question about the interview process. But I got to tell you, that was wonderfully done. Thank you very much. If you add that to your slide, just stick it in there. And I am now ready to vote on this whole process. Just again, get the reader heads out so we can review it. And I think we can lay this to bed tonight.
I have Commissioner Katharina and then Commissioner Chen. I am aware of the time, but I'm assuming most of the commissioners agree we're making good progress and we should stay with this for a little longer. So Commissioner Katharina.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Summary and the flow chart was perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Pons, for asking for that additional information. I think it will help us all feel a lot more comfortable. When I look at and listen to our comments and hear the comments from the public, I'm coming away with kind of a step process that I think balances all of the needs of this situation. The IRC creates the RFP, we create the criteria, the staff uses their expertise and the SSC to have a confidential process for scoring, and then we review. And I think that is exactly what we need to have to move forward. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Chen, and then at this point, I don't have any other speakers, but I would like to give council and staff a chance to weigh in after that. Commissioner Chen.
I just wanted to reiterate what Commissioner Pons said. With that flow chart, it clarified it for me, and I'd be ready to vote tonight.
Very good. Thank you for that. Staff, council, any comments?
Yes, I just, Richard, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know that in-person interviews or interviews as part of a proposal usually occur within a SSC. Is there a way to do that here, or would we need to, or even Hillary, or is this something staff would still need to take back? I've only seen it during SSCs, not in a public forum. So that's the only reason I'm asking before we get too far.
Yeah, I mean, just from a procurement perspective, I think it just depends on how, when, and who to. I mean, I'm confident we can figure it out. It really depends on some of the specifics. But yeah, I think that's something we can work into the process. We gotta ask those questions. But I'll defer to Hillary on any issues related to the vote today and how significant a change that is.
That is, it's part of the proposal that's been offered. I mean, the proposal that's on the table is the proposal by the ad hoc committee, and there's been a discussion, and it would be going forward with that proposal. And so that's fine to amend that motion as long as it's clear in the motion what's going to be done here.
Very good. So in that sense, would it be enough to simply say that the motion is to approve the procurement process option proposed by the ad hoc subcommittee as clarified by the slides just presented? Let me check with staff and council. Would that be a reasonable formulation and not really require a substitute motion, just a refinement? Andrew?
It's fine with me. I just wanted to clarify the clarification in the slide that was presented in the flow chart, whether we're fitting in a piece about the interviews.
Yeah, my inclination, subject to commissioner's agreement, and I'd very much like to hear from anyone on this, is that could be defined, as I think Richard mentioned, and as I think Commissioner Hansen has mentioned, as we define the criteria and define the inputs. So whether it's an interview or, as Commissioner Inman mentioned, a presentation, I would think that could be presented as part of the process, and we could discuss and move that forward. that sound correct to folks? Good. Andrew, would that be acceptable for your requirements? I don't want to force anything.
That sounds great to me. So the motion will include consideration of interviews as part of the selection process.
Very good. And I will just flag for the record, this process, while I think it's incredible, the work that's gone into it and to define tonight, does require real input and thought, not just from the commissioners, not just from staff, but from the public. We'll be looking for that. And I think we'll have opportunities to discuss that, maybe even under the next agenda item. But I will ask commissioners to keep those thoughts in mind, and some of the things that have been discussed tonight, some of the things we'll be discussing, because this is ambitious. But I think there's plenty of room. And if and when we discuss some of the details from the training that Common Cause offered this morning, I think we'll find some things that match up very, very well with this, and will maintain our commitment to transparency and public engagement. Any final comments, Commissioner Brown?
No, I was just.
Sorry, no problem. Okay.
I motion we vote.
Okay, very good. Moving along. Andrew, would you please call the roll according to the randomizer?
I'd be happy to. Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Chair Boehm.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson. I saw an aye, but I just want to clarify for the record.
Aye.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Appreciate it. Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina.
Aye.
And Commissioner Servin.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Very good. Thank you all for the robust discussion. Members of the Ad Hoc Committee, you will get at least one cookie from my son. Commissioner Krugliak, I think, has earned 3. Those will be coming soon. Thank you very, very much. Moving on. Agenda item 7, discussion and possible formation of subcommittees and or ad hoc committees. And I should just note, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dostal.
Oh, I just wanted to, since we are already at 8 o'clock, and I think the ad hoc committees are really important, I'd like to have a robust discussion. I'd like to move that we consider tabling that to the next meeting.
Very good. We can certainly entertain that motion now. If it's all right with commissioners, I will ask first, since I don't know that we'll have to engage in clarifying questions, but I do want commissioners aware. Andrew, do we have any public comment on this? Right now, I'm just asking if there are any.
There are no requests to speak on this item.
Very good. So in that, we, unless there's objection, or we'll take that motion from Commissioner Dostal. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Chen. Is there discussion? Very good. I want to be clear before we leave this item. I'm sorry, Commissioner Pons, please.
I would just ask the other commissioners if we could just submit to you recommended committees for consideration before we get to the meeting. I think that would help us, because we all have in our minds what committees we think should exist. So maybe 1 or 2 from each one of the commissioners would help move this process forward. And so I would amend the motion with that recommendation.
Very good. Thank you for that. Commissioner Dostal, is that acceptable?
Sure, if I can also make a motion that we adjourn at 8:30.
I think if we go through with this, that certainly won't be a problem. Let me just check on 2 things. Is it the commission's understanding that for the next steps in the process, on the previous item that if there's a need for the ad hoc subcommittee to reconvene or move forward based on these discussions, that's approved and understood. We haven't dissolved that subcommittee. I just want to make sure there's no objection to that. That's my understanding. Very good. And then to follow up on Commissioner Ponce's point, I think that's an excellent idea. In particular, because we have had some requests from the public seeking commissioners' engagement, I would ask commissioners to bear two things in mind under Commissioner Ponce's recommendation for that amendment. First, please, please, please feel free to submit creative ideas. Any commissioner can talk to staff without fear of the Brown Act violations or anything like that. Particularly if you're getting requests and want to recommend a way to respond, and we can add that to the formation of the paper. I'm sure it can be revised a bit. And at the same time, I'd encourage everyone to keep training in mind and training items as requested. We've had some of that discussion already, but I would hope we could move fast on that when we consider forming an ad hoc committee at our next meeting. With that, I want to ask one more time for any discussion. Commissioner Inman.
So just maybe reiterate what you just said. So the ad hoc subcommittee that we had for the RFP, we're still in existence theoretically, unless they're to handle any messes that we made that weren't cleaned up, so to speak.
Exactly. Unless staff or council tell me we can't do it, I'm going to consider that the previous motion did not dissolve the ad hoc subcommittee, and it remains in existence either to provide any necessary input following this meeting, or if staff or council would require discussion, that they can refer to the ad hoc subcommittee without fear of violating any lines. Staff.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and a second thing, so an ad hoc subcommittee that would follow that RFP process would be something that we would contemplate creating at the next meeting where we talk about. Okay, thank you.
That's correct. I would not want to create a new one, but because the old one may have some additional clarification, I'm sure Commissioner Kuliak will solve it in 47 seconds, so there won't be any issue with that. and Commissioner Inman, I think your legal advice will remain great, as well as your mapping expertise, but I think we're in good shape on that. So as long as that's clarified, let me ask one more time for any discussion. Commissioner Dostal, did you want to say anything else? I don't mean to cut you off. I saw your hand up. Okay, very good.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Serban, please.
Prior to adjourning, I would like to call to attention the earlier public comment that was made requesting that we provide an update on when trainings would be received. So if we could just address that somehow.
Sure. Let me beg the committee's indulgence, because Vice Chair Diaz not only has her hand up, but our plan, frankly, was for her to lead this discussion, and will remain our plan unless there's objection for the next meeting. But I did want to give Vice Chair Diaz a chance to weigh in, since she's been looking at this in detail. Please.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I am more than happy to discuss this topic at the next meeting. But I just, again, reiterating, if you have ideas in mind for additional ad hoc committees, especially the ones that staff have recommended in their staff report, and come prepared to that meeting to address what's not only written in the staff report, but also your own ideas, and to be ready to volunteer to be on an ad hoc committee.
May staff ask a clarifying question on that? Just to make sure, if there's, I thought I heard maybe Commissioner Pons, you mentioned Commissioner sending in ideas in preparation or prior to the next meeting. So if those ideas are sent in, if you could confirm or clarify, we seem to be using ad hoc and subcommittees interchangeably. So in the staff report, we talked a little bit about the ad hocs and the difference between the standing subcommittees and our ad hoc. So if that might help staff be able to list it appropriately under what is your intent, if you could name it accordingly, that would be helpful.
I think there should be recommendations for both. because we all understand the definition of a standing and an ad hoc committee. And so if you have a recommendation for a standing committee, for instance, the training committee would be a standing committee because training is continuous. It doesn't end in April the way the timelines show. It will go until we're done, because we're going to always discover something that would need some sort of, refinement or explanation. So in my mind, that would be a standing subcommittee, the training. And so we can make the distinction when we provide our recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes.
Commissioner Serban?
So maybe this is a question for council, but with Commissioner Pons's example that he just gave, would it be possible to structure a committee like that in a way where we do, let's say, like an ad hoc training committee that exists for a few weeks and then dissolve it and then reform it again at some time in the future when we decide we need to review the training requirement again?
Do you have audio here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can.
We can't hear you, Hillary. It
Hillary,
muted again.
I think you just muted yourself. There we go.
How about now? Good. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So best practice is if you anticipate ongoing involvement and needing ongoing action by a committee, to set it up as a standing subcommittee. If on the other hand, the anticipation is that, hey, they're going to go and just kind of convene on this and come up with some initial recommendations. And then the IRC, the full IRC, will take this up on an ongoing basis to decide, which trainings it actually needs or what have you. And then an ad hoc committee would be appropriate. But if you're anticipating at the outset that, hey, we think we're going to need this committee to be weighing in on a regular basis, continually throughout the process, just probably set it up as a standing committee from the get-go.
Very good. Seeing no other discussion, Andrew, I'll ask for a vote on the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I'm sorry, I've got to, before we start, Commissioner Vice Chair Diaz?
Can you restate the motion so we know that what we're voting on? Because I'm still not clear.
No problem. The motion as I have it is to table this discussion on this agenda item to our next meeting, with the understanding that commissioners will be thinking about it and submitting ideas to staff.
Okay, so we would not be taking any staff recommended formation of any ad hoc at this moment.
At this moment, correct. We would maintain, just to clarify, the ad hoc subcommittee on the RFP process in order to keep clarification going, but no others are approved or formed at this point. But ideas on that based on the staff paper should be submitted, and we'll have it on the agenda for our next meeting. That's the motion. But the motion is to table the item to our next meeting with the understanding that commissioners will be submitting input to staff.
Aye.
Thanks for.
Thank you. Commissioner Katarina?
Aye.
Chair Boehm?
Aye.
Commissioner Serban?
Aye.
Commissioner Pons? Commissioner Dostal?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Diaz?
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Inman?
Aye.
Commissioner Russ?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Very good. Thank you very much. We will move on to item 8, future agenda items in our next meeting. The next regular commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 11th, 2021 at 2 p.m. and again will be held virtually. Before I go into any details, well, let me just say at least one item that I think staff would like to provide, and I'd invite them to speak when we get to the motion, is training from counsel on redistricting 101, in effect, some key legal concepts and the legal framework. Beyond that, we can take suggestions, but let me just ask if there's anything in the category of clarifying questions. I assume not. Very good. Andrew, do we have any requests from the public to speak?
There are no requests to speak on this item.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion. Well, I'm not even sure we need a motion, frankly, on this, but let me ask if there's any discussion. Commissioner Inman, thank you. Commissioner Inman, please.
Thank you. So one thing that we get a budget, a monthly budget statement with the fluid situation that we find ourselves in regarding census. Could that be something that, staff could provide just a quick update on any changes in the status of census data being released until the point at which it does become available? That would help us inform timelines, or maybe just a statement of what our timelines look like given the current state of the census. If staff could provide something of that nature.
And that could also cover such things as legislative action that might be taken alongside that, correct?
Yes.
Good. Barbara, I'm sorry to cut you
No,
off.
no, I just wanted for clarification. Would the timeline that the commission approved, that tentative flow timeline, knowing it was fluid, be updated or reflecting any information we know be helpful? Would that meet the need?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pons.
That's a good suggestion.
So my question to the other commissioners is, all of our meetings are open to the public. Do the commissioners feel like maybe we should have 15 to 20 minutes of an executive session that we can have frank and open discussions among ourselves before we open it up to the public for their comment? I don't know if it's a violation of the Brown Act or anything like that, but maybe that would help us to iron out some of the issues before we go public with them. And maybe 15 to 20 minutes, that would be something that I think would be valuable, but only if you agree.
I heard the word Brown Act, which on my automatic system immediately refers to.
That would indeed be a violation of the Brown Act. The Brown Act does provide for closed session meetings, but under very limited and narrow exceptions. So as those exceptions arise, we will certainly advise you if and when something is appropriate for a closed session. But in terms of just a general standing executive session, that would not be permissible under the Brown Act.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Diaz, sorry.
Oh, I saw Commissioner Inman's hand before mine.
Very good. Commissioner Inman.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand from my previous.
I thought, very good. Back to Vice Chair Diaz.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to address one of the public comments at the beginning of the meeting about live testimony. I'm not sure right now. I know there's the online form, but I want to make sure that people have the full possibility of participating. So I guess I would present that to staff, and how would that look like? Because I have attended meetings in other jurisdictions that have that.
I'm happy to address that, Chair Bam, if you'd like.
Please, please.
We've tried to structure this like we have an in-person meeting where individuals have a request to speak form that they fill out so we can capture their name and phone number. Understanding that we're in this virtual world, we are certainly open to whatever the commissioners feel is appropriate. The intent with the form is just so that we have an idea of the number of speakers that we anticipate for agenda items, and helps to time how long we might have for the items. But certainly what we can do is, again, at the commission's direction, is just ask if there are others that are attending that want to speak on this item. They could raise their hand in Zoom. That certainly would be an option that might address the concerns.
And we've actually been using that option. You may have seen that in practice today with calling on someone who had raised their hand who didn't fill out a request to speak in advance. So we're already actually implementing that process.
Thank you both. Commissioner Serban.
And if we can make that clear on the website and our other channels of communication that public input is welcome and we invite it, at the meeting without any need to register in advance, I think that'd be great. I think on the website right now, it implies that you need to have some sort of like pre-registration or something.
So let me just clarify. Is there sufficient commissioner interest that we should have an agenda item, in effect, updating public input process? Or would that be something not to decide right now? Is there any feeling one way or the other? Commissioner Serban?
I think that's something that might be best addressed through the ad hoc subcommittee that I think was contemplated. The redistricting, outreach, and communication. I think that committee might be best to deal with that.
Very good. So let me ask commissioners to submit thoughts on that as part of the submission we discussed under the previous item. Staff will look to your recommendations on whether there's enough there to discuss before the ad hoc subcommittee, or maybe as part of the creation of it, if that's where we go on that agenda item. And if not, we can go a different direction. Good. Okay. I should note for the record that there is still an ongoing list of items that we've discussed before. Those remain actively under consideration, and we'll look to staff to bring those as we through the process. And commissioners, of course, are free to ask about them at any time. Commissioner Serban?
And this might be another matter for the subcommittee on public participation and outreach, but I did want to ask again. I remember the last meeting, the members of the public had asked about having the agenda released a few days earlier, or having some earlier notice of what might be discussed during our meetings. I'm wondering if there was I'm sure staff is probably thinking about that, or is there an update on maybe on that?
I'm happy to respond on that. Yes, staff are constantly thinking of that. We're working really hard. Just as an example, I know we're working very closely with the ad hoc committee to get that document posted up until that last day, and then to get the PowerPoint out. So we will continue to do that as we refine our processes with all of you.
I was going to say I take full blame for hitting the right at the deadline this week. That was all on me.
No blame place. It was a very tight timeline to anyway. And a lot of these, as you're trying to get the documents, the information, and get it posted. So it's not a blame or excuse. We're constantly trying to improve our efficiencies, and we'll continue to strive towards that.
And I do want to offer, I hope on behalf of the commission, thanks for all the public input that we have received and for the engagement. It's by no means the end of the process. In fact, I for one would expect the dialogue to intensify, but I think the commitment remains strong, and we'll continue to look at ways to improve, including getting agendas and supporting documents out earlier, because I think that's what most, if not all, commissioners would like. So very good on that. Thank you for raising it. Any other thoughts before we leave that item and move to adjournment? Commissioner Caterina.
Hi, I'll be quick. First off, if you hadn't attended, as David mentioned, the training this morning from Common Cause, I would encourage everyone to do that as well. Something kind of came up to me, and I just wanted to bring it up as a point of just of interest, and certainly for legal to comment if it's appropriate, because I think it is important for us to all know that what we're doing is okay. You know, one of the things they talked about in that meeting was this idea that we are going to be doing more outreach and engagement, and we are the ambassadors for our communities. And so with that in mind, I thought perhaps it might be a good idea to just do more, if you will, district, meetings that are not ad hoc meetings or subcommittee meetings, but just meetings of the 3 or 4, or in the case of District 2, commissioners, and have the opportunity to talk about the issues that they see in their communities, just to share our ideas. And so my question to staff and council is it okay for us to have a phone conversation between, let's say, the 3 commissioners from District 3?
Without setting up a formal ad hoc.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
okay,
Hillary.
I think given that we're talking about future agenda items, it would be appropriate for us to consider that as an item that you're requesting further information from staff and council on how to potentially structure district-based meetings that would be outside the current meeting schedule, and also the public hearing process, which will include some of that as well. And then also obviously the constraints imposed by COVID, and there are some complicating factors there. So we can, I think, put that on the list or something that you'd like more information from staff.
Okay. That sounds fine. Thank you.
Any other closing comments? Very good. We move to item 9, adjournment at 8:19 p.m. That concludes the business before the commission. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting on February 11th. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Goodbye, all.
Thank you, everyone.